Welcome to MSPTDA video number 16. Hey, in this video, we're going to study Power BI Desktop, a comprehensive introduction to Power Query DAX dashboards and publishing in the amazing and free Microsoft tool, Power BI Desktop. Now, last video, video number 15, we studied Excel Power Pivot. Now, the great news about studying Excel Power Pivot is that everything we learned about data modeling with Power Query and with DAX will be virtually the same over here in Power BI Desktop. Now, the goals of this video are similar to last video, except for we have one extra step at the end. We're going to use Power Query to import our fact table data from CSV files, and all of our dimension tables will be from Excel. We'll import this all into our Power BI desktop file. Then we'll build our data model that involves importing Power Query transformations, relationships, calculated table for our date table, calculated columns, and then a bunch of measures. Then we create 4 different dashboards. Then we'll publish the single Power BI desktop file and all 4 dashboards to an online source so we can consume the reports on any device. This is an example of one of the dashboards we'll create with Power BI Desktop where we can generate embed code to put it into a website. I can click and it filters the report. I can move ahead to one of the other dashboards. We can also publish it so we can consume it on any device. If you like what you see in this video, click that subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified about new videos. Now, in order to complete this project, you'll have to download the zip folder with all of our data files. There's also PDF notes. These PDF notes cover every single thing we do in this video. Now, just to remind you from last video, do we choose Power Pivot or Power BI Desktop? Well, we covered this last video, but as we'll see here, there's more visualizations and different types of reports. The visualizations and dashboards are interactive, and we're able to publish over here in Power BI Desktop. Approximate history of Power BI Desktop. In Excel in 2009, that was the first Power Pivot add-in. That's where we had our first glance of the columnar database, DAX Formulas, Relationships, and the data model. Power Query was debuted in 2013. Then all of these Power tools were refined in Excel between 2009 and 2015. And then in 2015, Microsoft combined all these tools together and gave it away for free, called Power BI Desktop. Now, there's different versions of Power BI. Here's the Microsoft website that describes each one of the versions: Power BI Desktop, Power BI Pro, and Power BI Premium. Now, we're going to use the Power BI Desktop. This is where we connect to multiple sources, clean and transform our data, do our DAX formulas, and build our dashboards. But in terms of publishing, with the free version, we can publish to the powerbi.com website. And there's some great services once we publish it, like printing, creating PowerPoint slides, and even creating the embed code that we can use in our own website that's viewable to the public. But what the free version is missing is when we publish it to powerbi.com, it's not like the pro version where we can publish it and have others view it on any device. Also, when we publish it here, if you don't want to publish it to powerbi.com, but you want to keep it on premises, then you want the premium version. Now, we are going to try the 60-day free trial because we want to see how amazing it is to publish our powerbi.com reports and view it on any device. But if you only have the free version, well, guess what? We can still share 2 different ways. We can do it the old-fashioned way. Simply email the .pbix file, and then the person can simply download the free version and view it. And of course, you can use the embed code option. Now, downloading Power BI Desktop. Guess what? There's 2 different ways we can download it: Microsoft Download Page and Microsoft Windows Store. Now, I actually just saw a great video from Avi. There's a link in the upper corner here where he shows you step by step how to download. You should go check out that video. But here's the deal. I've been downloading for the last few years from Microsoft download page. And that means every month when they update it, I have to go and re-download and reinstall it. If, however, you use the Microsoft Windows Store link to download, then you get automatic updates each month. On page 6 in our PDF notes, there's a list of some of the visualizations available in Power BI Desktop with a description. We will use things like matrix, line chart, and a column and bar chart. As we use those particular visualizations, we'll talk about the importance of each one. Our overriding steps for this project: step 1, we have to import, clean, and transform using Power Query. We'll create a date table with DAX formulas, both table and calculated column DAX formulas. Create our relationships, our DAX measures. We'll hide all the elements that shouldn't be in report view, create our 4 dashboards, publish our file, and refresh our data. I already downloaded my free version and opened a blank file. I opened it from the Start menu. This is what I see when I open. Up in the title bar, I see Untitled. One thing about Power BI Desktop is that it is updated monthly. And the What's New link is quite good. Each month, it has a good description of what's new and different. Now I'm going to close this. We need to save it, so I'm going to use F12. I named it 016 MSPTDA Intro to Power BI Finished. Notice the file extension is .pbix. Click Save. Now this is Power BI Desktop. Up in the title, we see the name of our file. There's Home ribbon, View, Modeling, and Help. In the Home ribbon tab, External Data is our Power Query. Modeling tab, this is where we create our DAX formulas. Table DAX formulas, calculated columns, and measures. Over here on the far left are our icons. This is Report View. Data View, which really should be called Table View. We don't have any tables. Relationships View. And I'm in the November 2018 update. And so there's a new beta relationship view, which we'll look at. Back over in Report View over here on the right. This is a new preview of a filter option. I'm going to close this. We'll look at that later. Visualizations. These are the different chart and table visualizations we can use in our dashboard. Down here, this is where we'll drop our fields just like in a pivot table. Over here is where we'll do our formatting for our visualizations. Over here is the field pane. Here is our blank white canvas. This is where we'll create our dashboards. Down in the bottom, we see tabs. We'll eventually have 4 tabs, 4 different dashboards. All of the dashboards together will be called the report. And at the end, we can publish this report and view all the different dashboards. Now we want to go look at our files we need to import. Up here, we can see 016 text files. That's a zip folder you need to download and unzip. Inside, we see these files. I'm going to double-click Start. It's the Start folder that we're going to point Power Query to. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4 CSV files with our fact table data. If we look at one of these tables, each one of these CSV files will have ISO date, product ID, sales rep, units sold, discount, and cost of goods sold total. These are the same files we used last video. Each Excel workbook has exactly 1 sheet. Over here in Power BI Desktop, external data, that's Power Query. We want to go to Get Data. I do not see From Folder, so I come down to More. Get Data dialog box. There it is, Folder. Click Connect. Folder path, Browse. I see my Start folder. I select it. Click OK. Click OK. In this intermediate dialog box, we want to click Edit. I do not want to click Combine or Load. Edit. This is the Power Query editor inside of Power BI Desktop. Almost everything in here is the same as over in Excel. First thing we do is name our query. F transactions and enter. Here's our one single step. Over here, there's the name of the query. Now, earlier in the class, we used the extension column to do some filtering to make sure that we only get .csv and that the case was correct. Our folder will always have the .csv lowercase. So we don't need any of the attributes for our files. Come to Content, right-click, remove other columns. There it is. This is the Combine Files button. When we click it, it's going to ask us what the delimiter is. In Combine Files, we want to make sure that our delimiter is comma. Click OK. Now, when we click OK, it's going to do a bunch of steps. And look at that. It created, as we've seen many times before in this class, a sample file. Then it built a custom function, which it used over here. There's invoke custom function, remove other columns, expand table. That's where it combined all the files. And finally, it changed the type. We could see our columns over here. There's our F transaction where all of these steps were created. I'm going to collapse this over in the Queries pane. We want to click on our F transaction table. We have all of these columns. ISO date, we're actually going to have to transform this into a proper date. Product ID and sales rep, both of those are foreign keys that we'll use to connect to our dimension tables. Unit sold, discount, total cost of goods sold. Those are all the numbers we're going to use in our measures. Now, let's do two transformations. The first one is I need to convert ISO date to a proper date. And Power Query in this step right here already transformed this to a number. But we need it as text. So we're going to click the data type icon and convert it to text. Now, it's going to ask us, do you want to replace? And we definitely want to replace. That means that step right there now contains text for the ISO date. If we go up to the formula bar, we can see ISO date type text. Now we want to convert this a second time. So I click data type icon. And now I want to convert it to date. And I definitely want to add a new step. It is the combination of text and as a separate step, date data type that converts ISO date to a proper date. Now we'll change the name in just a second. We have one other transformation. Now for cost of goods sold, we want to round this column to the penny. Right-click, transform, round, round. I want 2 decimal places. Click OK. And there is our round step. Now we want to rename this column, so double-click, and we'll call this date and enter. There's our last step. Now, close and apply, that's different than over in Excel Power Pivot. There it's close and load. The close here means it will close the Power Query editor. Apply means that it will apply all of these steps. We're going to click close and apply to load this to the Power BI data model. Now, if we ever need to edit this query, and later we will have to, we go back to Edit Queries, and that opens up the Power Query window. Now, we want to go look at our table in Data or Table View. There's our table. We could see down here 1.1 million rows. Over here, there's the name of the table, and here's our fields. Now, notice something about these fields. What is that sigma doing? And we're in Data or Table View. If we go over to Report View, we see the table name and the field names, and the same icons are here. Now, there's 2 things we want to notice about these columns in the fact table and that sigma icon. The first thing is the sigma icon over here in Power BI Desktop means that there's a number in this column. Now, I think they should have picked a different icon because it seems like it suggests that you can simply drag and drop. Well, in fact, you can drag and drop this into a visualization, but it will create an implicit measure. And as we talked about last video, we don't want to do that. Now, all the reasons we talked about last video still apply here, except for there's one other reason we don't want to take a number field and create an implicit measure. And that has to do with if you have the Power BI Pro version, you can actually download from powerbi.com the data model into Excel. And if you had implicit measures, those measures would not show up. And there's other problems also. So no implicit measures. Now we'll create our measures and hide the number fields later in our fact table. But the second problem we have in the fact table are date columns. Now, when we studied Excel last video, when we dragged a date column from the fact table into a pivot table, what happened? A bunch of calculated columns were attached to the fact table. And we don't want to do that. Well, guess what? Over in Power BI Desktop, it's even worse. If I drag this date column from a fact table into a visualization, it will create a complete hidden date table. Then, if I drag the date field again and again, every time I do it, it creates a new hidden date table. We do not want to do that. We're going to create a single date table using DAX formulas, and then we'll come and hide this. All right, so over in Table View, we have our fact table imported. Now, before we create our date table, we need to import the Excel dimension tables. Let's go take a look at those Excel dimension tables. Here's our folder that we downloaded and unzipped. That's the file. I'm going to double click and open this. Now, last video, some of our dimension tables were in Excel and some of them were in Access. But in this video, they all come to us inside of Excel. Now, this one is fine. We'll import it as a dimension table and build a relationship. But just as we did last video, here's product, and there's a snowflake relationship. That means we have category ID connected to this to get category, supplier ID to connect to get our supplier. Now, in our reports, we need category and supplier as conditions or criteria or filters. So rather than importing this and building a snowflake relationship, we're going to use Power Query to merge these tables to bring category and supplier in. All right, I'm going to close this file. Over here in Power BI Desktop, we go to Get Data. And there it is, the first option. I want to look into an Excel file. Click. There it is. Double click. Just as we saw over in Excel Power Pivot, the navigator allows us to look into particular files and see all of the objects. We want to check each one of our tables. Now, each individual table will be imported as a separate query. Now, when we were connecting to an SQL database, it was easier because we actually pulled the product table in, and it automatically, because there was a relationship, pulled the related columns. But we'll have to make this transformation inside of Power Query. Now I click Edit, not Load or Cancel, Edit. Here in the Query pane, we can see we have each individual query. We want to make sure and click through each one of these. Make sure we have the right data types. The names will be fine. Here are the steps. So you go through each one, making sure that the data types are correct. And they should all be correct. Now, if we look at dProduct, here is our foreign key for category ID. So instead of doing VLOOKUP in Excel or using relationships, we'll merge using this as the foreign key, and then over in D category, there'll be a primary key. So with dProduct selected, Home, over to Combine, drop down for Merge Queries, Merge Queries. The top table, dProduct, I'm going to select Category ID. From the drop down, I select D category. I select Category ID. We're going to merge these in a left outer join. Click OK. Now we have this Expand button, so I'm going to click Expand. Uncheck Use Original. Uncheck everything, because all I want is the category. This will pull the category in, and now we have our category column. We're going to continue merging, but this time we'll select Supplier ID. That's the foreign key. Click the drop down and select Supplier. There's our primary key. Left outer, click OK. Now we can click Expand, uncheck everything, and we want just Supplier. Click OK. This is our way of doing a lookup and pulling that value in using the Merge feature. Now, guess what? We do not want D category to be imported into the data model. So we come over here in the Query pane, right-click, and uncheck Enable Load. We can see it's italicized. Same thing for D supplier. Right-click, uncheck Enable Load. Now we have our two dimension tables. We can close and load to the data model. Over here in Data or Table View, we can see we have our dimension tables. We can select it and look. Now we can go to Relationship View. it looks like it already interpreted and created relationships. The relationships look correct. One-to-many relationship. If we go over to our new beta view, we can resize and we can also add descriptions, selecting each table and writing a description. Now we'll come back to this new view when we have to hide things, because this new beta version, it's much easier to hide different elements than in earlier versions of Power BI Desktop. Our next task is over in Table or Data View. We want to go to Modeling, and we need to create a date table. And we're going to use New DAX Table Function. Now, over in Excel, we created calculated columns and measures. Over here in Power BI Desktops, we have a third option for our DAX formulas. So our first DAX formula over here in Power BI Desktop will be a DAX table formula. I'm going to click that button. And just like over in Excel, we have to create our formulas in the formula bar. I'm going to type the name of the date table, ddate. And guess what? Over here, all we need is an equal sign. Now, if you remember in Excel, equal signs were used for calculated columns. And colon equal sign was used for a measure. But over here in Power BI Desktop, we only use an equal sign. Now I'm going to type CAL, down arrow, and I'm going to hit the Tab key to get the calendar function. Now the great thing about the calendar function is I put the start date, the end date, and it will automatically create a unique list of dates from the start to the end. Now for a proper date table, we have to start on January 1st and end on December 31st. We have to do that because the time intelligence functions depend on having every single day for every single year from the fact table. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, the first way we're going to do that is we're going to look using the min function through F transaction date column. Now, the min function will pick out the minimum date. But what if it's not January 1st? No problem. We're going to use the date function to create the January 1st date. So we're going to first wrap year around min. That way it'll find the min date and always get the correct year. And then we use the date function. There it is, year argument. I come to the end, comma, and month is 1, comma, day is 1. Now notice this date function is just like it is over in Excel. And for that matter, so is year and min. Close parentheses. Now we have our start date, comma. And we have to use the max function on the date column. That'll find the biggest day in the whole entire fact table. We need the year. And now we need the date. There's the year. And luckily, comma, 12 is the month, comma, 31 is the day. Close parentheses on date. Now we have our start and end date. Close parentheses. And now when I hit Enter, I get my unique list of all the possible days from all the possible years from the fact table. Now notice, I typed this out linearly, and we talked about this last video. Lots of times people like to format their DAX code. So over here in Power BI Desktop, I'm going to format this. Right before the calendar, I'm going to use Shift-Enter to get to a new line, Tab to indent, then before date. Shift-Enter. It's indented. I come to the end right before this date, Shift-Enter. And now I'm going to get rid of that last parentheses because the convention is Shift-Enter, Shift-Tab, close parentheses so it lines up with the function. I get annoyed because I like to close it and see it right in the formula bar. I'm going to leave my calendar DAX table function in a linear fashion. Now, for this date table, we're going to manually create the calculated columns. We're going to use the New Column button. Our first column will be month number. The month function is just like in Excel. We need to access the date column. But over here in Power BI Desktop, we can't click on the column like we could over in Excel. We actually have to type it out in the formula bar. DD, I'm going to use table name, and in square brackets, the field name. close parentheses, and enter. Now the month number will be important as a helper column to help sort the next column we're going to create, which is going to be the month name, and I'm going to call it just month. Now over in Excel, we would use the text function to format a date as a particular word, but there is no text function over here in DAX. We have to use the format function. Now the format function works the same as the text function does in Excel. DD date, there's our date column, comma, and there it is, format, just as we would in Excel, in double quotes, MMMM, that's the full month, but we want just 3 M's, end double quote, close parentheses, and enter. So we have this column to show you why we need the month number to help us with this month name column. Let's go over to report. Over in the field list, I'm going to drag the actual month out into the white blank canvas. I'm going to expand this, and this is a table we can see right there. And when we go to use the paint roller here to format, there's a bunch of different categories. Now, when you're learning how to format for the first time, especially when you're coming from Excel, it'll take a while to find things. But it looks like values, if I open that and scroll way down, there's the text size. I'm going to increase it to 15 or 16. Drag this to expand, and we can clearly see it's sorting alphabetically. Now, the reason this didn't happen over in Excel in Power Pivot is because we use the automatic date table feature, so it fixed it for us. Also, if you think about this in comparison to Excel pivot tables, the reason that a standard pivot table sorts correctly is because there's a custom list behind the scenes that instructs a pivot table to sort, not alphabetically, but according to the calendar months. So we go back over to table, click in the month column, and we use the sort by column feature. Click the drop down, and for the month column, I'm going to say sort by month number. Now when I go back over to report, I can see it sorts perfectly. Back over to data or table view. We want to add a column for year, new column. And just as we would do over in Excel, we use the year function, and we'll use it on the DDate date column, and enter. Now, this company has a fiscal start year of April 1st. So we're going to have to calculate fiscal quarter and fiscal year. But first, I want a standard quarter, because that'll be, in essence, a helper column that we'll use in subsequent formulas. So new column. Quarter is going to be the name of the column. And just as we did in Excel in our prereq classes, we're going to actually use the round up function. And we're going to look at the month column, or month number, divided by 3 for the first 3 months. That'll give us 0.33, 0.67, and 1. So what do? We round to the integer. So round up, divide the month number by 3, and round to the integer. That gives us the proper standard quarter. Now, what do we need for fiscal quarter? Actually, for fiscal quarter and year. Well, April 1st is the start of the fiscal year. So actually, April, May, June have to be 1. That means January, February, March is fiscal quarter 4 from the previous year. So fiscal quarter for these records here would be 4, and the year would be 2016. So I'm going to add a new column. So fiscal quarter, and we'll use the if function. We're going to check whether the standard quarter, DD quarter, is equal to 1, comma. If that's true, then we need to go back to 4. Otherwise, we're going to use DDate quarter and subtract 1. That way, quarter 1 will be 4, quarter 2 will be 1, quarter 3 will be 2, and so on. Close parentheses and enter. Now we also need fiscal year. Right here, instead of 2017, we need 2016. And then the remaining 2017s will be correct from April 1st to December 31st. New column. We'll use the same logical test, comma, but if it's true, we take the current year and subtract 1. Otherwise, we're just going to use the current year. close parentheses. And both these two columns will work when the fiscal year starts April 1st. Now we need a column for fiscal period, new column. And in this fiscal period, we want to show Q and then join it to fiscal quarter. And then join it ampersand. We're going to use a single dash and double quotes, and we're going to join it to, well, we do want fiscal year, but when I hit enter, I actually only want the last two digits, so we'll use the right function, which works just like it does in Excel. We'll take the right of that, and please give me only right to and enter. Now there's going to be a problem here. Let's go over to report view. There's fiscal period. Uh-oh, it sorts all of the Q1s together. I definitely don't want that. I want Q1 17, Q2 17, and so on. So we have to go back over to data or table view and add a special helper column to help sort this column. New column. Now for this helper column, we're going to take the fiscal year and multiply it by 10. When I hit enter, we can see that we have an extra 0. Now we can simply add the fiscal quarter. And when I hit enter, now I have a number that I can use to sort this column. So 2016 4. If we scroll down, we can see 2017 1, 2017 2, and so on. So now I select fiscal period, and I want to sort by sort fiscal period. Now if we go back to report view, there we get our sort, Q1 17, Q2 17, and so on. Now we have a few things we still need to do to our date table. Now we're going to have to mark this as a date table, but before I do that, I want to make sure that this has the right data type, either date time or date. I'm going to choose date. Formatting, that's just because I want to see it over here. So I'm going to choose that date number formatting. We will hide some of these columns later because some of them are helper columns and we don't want them in report view. But we have to mark this as a date table. Now back in Excel, we marked our date table as a date table, so we didn't have automatic grouping. And so the time intelligence functions understood that that was the date table. Here in Power BI Desktop, we need to mark it as a date table so that the automatic date tables are not created when we accidentally drop a date field from a fact table. And we want time intelligence functions to understand this is a date table. So I mark this as a date table, and I'm going to choose the date column. Click OK. Two more tasks for our date table. I'm going to go to the beta version for relationships. We need to create a one-to-many relationship. So I click and drag date over to F transactions. I can see a one-to-many relationship. We also don't need our helper columns to show up over in report view. Right now, we can see all of the columns, including columns like sort, fiscal period. So back over to beta. And I love this about this new beta version. Month number, hold shift, click on sort fiscal period, and I'm totally allowed to select multiple columns. You can see multiple columns are selected over here also. Right click, and different than Excel, over in Excel it says hide from client tool. Here it's hide in report view. I'm going to hide those. All right, so we've completed our date table task. We can even look over here and see that those columns are not showing. Now, the next major task is to create our measures. Over here in data or table view, we want to create a bunch of measures under our F transactions. Now, we want to remind ourselves, just like in Excel, we don't want to create implicit measures. Now, I'm totally allowed to drag one of these numbers. I'm going to drag units sold over here. And look at that. It created an implicit measure. It happened to default to a column chart. But just as over in Excel, we don't have as much freedom with implicit measures. Things like the name of the measure, the actual functions that go into it, the formatting. And also, there's a different problem. If you ever publish this to powerbi.com and then try to download it into Excel, implicit measures will not show up. So we want to follow our rule that we learned over in Excel and create explicit measures. Over here, F transactions, modeling. The first measure we're going to create, or the first couple ones, are simple sum functions. So I'm going to click on New Measure. This one will be total units, sum, F transactions, and we're going to add up all of the units sold. And as we talked about last video, we always refer to columns or fields with the full table name and then in square brackets, the field name. Close parentheses. We have freedom to name it, whatever functions or formula we want to create, enter, and of course we can format it. Whole number is fine. New measure. Total cost of goods sold, summing up F transactions column, cost of goods sold total. I'm going to add currency, English, United States. Now, notice here we have a completely different icon than over in Excel. It looks like a little calculator. Remember, over in Excel, it had an f of x. I think I like the f of x better. But there you go. That means that's a measure. That is what we should be dragging into reports to make our calculations, not those sigma columns. Now, we're not going to add a calculated column to calculate line revenue. In last video, we saw how to do that, but we also saw how to use the SUMX function, an iterator that can simulate a helper column, but all in a single measure. So our new measure for total revenue. And I'm going to try and build this using the formatting, even though, as I said before, I don't like it so much. Shift, Enter, Tab. We're going to use SUMX. This is an awesome function. We give it the table, just like we have this table down here, and we build a helper column. In SUMX, we simply put the table, F transaction, tab, comma, and then we build our formula as if it was in a calculated column. Now, the first thing we need to do, since there's a relationship between this F transaction and product, is to look up the retail price. And as we learned last video, the function we use is related. There's no VLOOKUP in DAX. And all related needs, since there's a relationship between the two tables, is what is the name of the column that has the item I want to go and get and bring back to this table. So I'm going to look up retail price. And so that lookup function iterates over every single row in the fact table and returns the price. Well, of course, we multiply price times units sold, tab. Now there's a discount for each row. You could see examples here, and that discount is the number of pennies discounted. So we have to, in parentheses, say, hey, there's the whole dollar minus the actual number of pennies subtracted as a discount. So that will give us our complete formula for calculating the line item revenue for each row in the F transaction table. Now, there's a special name for what happens inside of SUMX or a calculated column. It's called row context. That means the related function looks up, and we can see the table down here, but related for each row in this table looks up the product ID, retrieves the price. And then for these two columns which live in that table, and we can see the units and the discount here, row context allows the formula as it iterates or copies down through this table to see each row and get the appropriate values. Now we actually have to round this. I'm going to use the round function and come to the end, comma 2, close parentheses. There we have the full formula that will iterate. Now, I didn't do my formatting, so I'm going to Shift-Enter, Tab, and then after related, Shift-Enter. It's already tabbed. Shift-Enter, 2, Shift-Enter, Shift-Tab to line up with round because I'm closing off round. Shift-Enter, Shift-Tab, and now I need to line up with SUMX, close parentheses. And now when I hit Enter, well, I don't get to see anything. We're not over in Excel where we can see our measure grid. We could see the total revenue icon over there. I definitely want to come up and add United States English. I'm curious. In the comments, let me know who likes to type it straight out and who likes to format their DAX formulas like this. Now, by the way, if you like this formatting, it's no problem. I just don't collapse this, and then I click on a different measure. And when I click back, I can see my formatted DAX formula. Now, I want to go over to Report View and remind you about filter context, which is how our measures will calculate when we drag them into visualizations. Now, I already created this table, drag product over here. Now, let's come down, and because it's a table, I'm just going to check total revenue, total cost of goods sold. And I can see for each row, it's calculating the correct total revenue and cost of goods sold for each product. But how is it doing it? Because it's the same formula all the way down. It's not like in Excel where we have cell references pointing to the condition or criteria. Well, filter context, that row header condition or criteria or filter is the product belen. That means when the measure hits this row, the product table is filtered down to just the belen product. That belen filter flows across the relationship, hits the fact table, and the fact table is filtered down to just the belen records. Then the measure total revenue or cost of goods sold makes the calculation on the filtered fact table. That's why it's called filter context. Here, fact table is filtered down to belen. Here, it's filtered down to Carlota, and so on. All right, filter context. Now we have a few more measures we want to create over in data or table view. But before we go over there, I want you to make a mental note of what the total overall revenue is, 1.5 billion. Now we're going to come over to data table view. And our next measure is average daily revenue. Now, that calculation has to be done in 2 steps. We first have to calculate the total revenue for each day. Once we have those numbers, then the second step is to average those numbers. Now, in order to make a calculation like that, we have to understand the concept context transition, and we have to know how to use the calculate function. Now, we covered this last video, but I'm actually going to show you and illustrate it in a slightly different way in this video. Now, I'm going to take this entire formula. Remember, this formula calculates total revenue. So if I can put this formula in the context of each day, it can calculate all of the daily revenue numbers. So I'm actually going to copy this and then hit Enter. And guess what? I'm going over to the dDate table. I'm going to add a new column. There it is right there. I'm going to call it daily revenue. And guess what? What is the granularity of this table? It's a daily granularity. So when I come up, Shift, Enter, Control V, that formula should work to calculate the daily revenue for each row. That means that the date table will be filtered down just to 1117, 1217, and so on as the formula copies down. So transactions can see just the records for that particular day. When I hit Enter, we get the grand overall total for every row. Yes, the problem is there is no filter context in a calculated column. That F transactions table for this first row still has every single day and every single transaction. But what we wanted to see is just the transactions for 1/1/2017. Well, guess what? There's row context in a calculated column, but no filter context. No problem. There's a function that can change the filter context, and that function is called the calculate function. Shift Enter. Type the letter C. I see calculate. I hit Tab. And by putting this formula for calculating total revenue into the expression, we don't even have to put a filter. Calculate will take the row context and convert it to an equivalent filter context. So now as we copy the formula down, F transactions, we'll see just the records for each day. Now I'm going to, at the end, Shift Enter, Shift Tab, close parentheses, and watch the magic of calculate. When I hit Enter, Now I get the daily total for each day. Now the name for what calculate did, that is taking row context and converting it to filter context, is called context transition. Where's the transition? From row context into filter context. Now here in this formula, in a calculated column, we explicitly use the calculate function to get the row context to filter our table. But we do not have to do it in a calculated column like this. If our goal is to calculate daily revenue amounts and then use those amounts in a formula to calculate an average, we can do it directly in the AVERAGEX function. Now I'm going to leave this column here for now, go over to the F transaction table. We're going to go up to modeling, new measure. I'm going to call this average daily revenue, and we're going to average using the AVERAGEX function. Now, what did we just do? We had the date table, and then we had our calculate and SUMX. And that generated every single daily total. Well, the combination of DD date table in the first argument of AVERAGEX, and then if we wanted to, we could do calculate and then SUMX and the rest of it. And it would work perfectly, meaning the combination of the first argument, table D date, with a granularity of day, and then our calculate SUMX formula to calculate the daily totals. Internally, AVERAGEX will do exactly what the calculated column does. And then it will take the amounts and average them. Now, guess what? We do not have to manually create that whole formula all over again. Because guess what? We already have a measure where we calculated total revenue. Remember, if I hit Tab, that total revenue is the SUMX formula. So now we have what we want. The SUMX formula will iterate over every single day in the DDate table, calculate the daily totals, and then average them. But wait a second. I thought that we had to wrap calculate around the SUMX in order to get the row context from the first argument of AVERAGEX to flow into our measure. Well, as we learned last video, every single measure automatically has a hidden calculate function. That means by creating the measure first with just SUMX and then using it in this iterative formula, we'll get exactly what we want. Context transition. So internally in SUMX, that transaction table for every row in the DDate table will be filtered down to just the transactions for each particular day. Now I'm going to close parentheses. One other thing. Remember what we said about measures. Measures, we only use square brackets. Columns or fields, we use the entire table and then the field name in square brackets. Now, the smartest DAX guys I know, Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari, they always say this convention of using only square brackets is awesome because that means every time we see a measure, we automatically know the context transition will happen. All right, I'm going to hit Enter and add some number formatting. And now we can use this measure in any particular report. And whatever the filter context from outside that flows in, that will be used by the total revenue in addition to whatever the day is for the date table. As an example, if we go over to Report View, down to F Transactions, I have this table selected. If I check Average Daily Revenue, drag this down below, extend the edge, that's the average daily revenue for the Butte product. That's amazing. Think about that. Internally, that fact table has this Butte condition to filter the fact table. Then internally, it has the single day for each row, filtering the fact table also. That's the power of DAX. Now, we need to build a few more measures. We're going to go back over to Data or Table View. I'm going to select F Transactions. Make sure that's selected. Modeling a new measure. This measure is going to be total gross profit equal sign. And guess what? We're going to use two measures. Total revenue minus total cost of goods sold. and that will calculate gross profit. Wherever we put this measure, the conditions or criteria will flow in. Whether or not it is filter context, meaning the criteria from one of the reports, or we happen to put this in to an iterator where we need row context, or even for that matter, a calculated column. Now we want to take total gross profit and compare it using division to total revenue. That will allow us to calculate percent gross profit. Now instead of doing straight division, as we saw last video, the divide function is great. We have numerator, denominator, and if we leave that final argument out, if we get a divide by 0 error, it will put a blank in. So the numerator is total gross profit, comma, and the denominator is total revenue. Close parentheses and enter. Oh, look at that. We want to add percentage number formatting. So wherever we drag that measure, the number formatting we want will show up. Now, actually, if we scroll down, total gross profit, I forgot to add some number formatting. Now, we have a few more measures we'll create later. I want to go over to relationships and hide a number of columns that we don't want to view in report view. Now, when we're hiding over here, you can hide columns, measures, or even whole tables. Date table we already did. But in F transactions, we want to hide every single column. So I clicked on the first one, hold shift, click on the last one. Those are just the columns. Right click, hide in report view. Now over in report view, we'll have just our measures. Sales rep ID, we don't want that. In report view. Product ID, hide in report view. But guess what? Category ID and supplier ID, those aren't even supposed to be there. Those were left over from when we merged the table. So we're actually going to go back into Power Query, Home, Edit Queries. Click on the product query, select category and supplier ID, right click, remove columns. It'll add an extra step here. When I click close and apply, it'll close the Power Query window and apply these changes into the data model. So I click, and now I have gone back and edited Power Query to refine our data model. Now we're ready to build our first dashboard. I go over to Report. I'm going to click the plus, double click. We're going to call this Average Daily Gross Profit. Now, actually, we don't want this anymore. I'm going to right-click, Delete Page. I'm going to click Delete. Our first dashboard will involve a number of visualizations, all with the Average Daily Gross Profit measure. Now, the way it works over here in Power BI Desktop is you click somewhere in the white, you select a visualization. Here's our field list. Then we can drag and drop to different areas in the fields area. Then we can use the paint roller or the format area to format it. So our first visualization, I click in the white, and we're going to use a matrix. There it is right there. This is similar to a pivot table. I'm going to click. We have our row headers, column headers, and then the intersecting areas where we put our measures to make our calculations. Now we're going to have product, and then a measure and some conditional formatting. So I'm going to come over to product, and watch this. Here's products. I'm going to click and drag to rows. That's kind of like a pivot table. I see my unique list. I can come over and extend. I can move the visualization. Now we want our measure for each one of the products. Average daily gross profit. I'm going to click and drag to values. Instantly, I see average daily gross profit by product. Now, over in formatting, if I click on the paint roller, there's a bunch of different areas. And as I mentioned earlier, when you're coming from Excel, it takes a while to get used to all of this. In the grid area, I'm going to come down to text size and increase it to 10. Now, I would like to have some conditional formatting using data bars. So the biggest values, there's Quad and Yanaki, those have the tallest bar. So this is conditional formatting. And this is a matrix, so it's listed under conditional formatting. And I can turn on data bars. If I want to go to advanced controls, I could select things like color. I'm going to close this. And look at that. Instantly, we can see Quad and Yanaki are the biggest. Now, why did we choose this particular visualization? Well, there's two components, the matrix and the conditional formatting. Anytime you choose a matrix or a table, you actually want to see the individual details, the individual numbers. Anytime you choose conditional formatting or charts, you want to get a quick visual impression. So by selecting matrix and conditional formatting together, we get the best of both worlds. Now next I want a column chart to show the same measure, average daily gross profit, but by sales rep and region. Now, a mistake that often happens is we're supposed to click in the white, then click on a new visualization. But if I accidentally have a different visualization selected and come up and select clustered columns, well, it is polite. It changes it. Control Z. So I'm going to click in the white and then click on clustered column. Now we're going to come down to sales rep, and we want to see how easy it is to create a hierarchy. Now I could drag region and sales rep separately, but we can create a hierarchy. Oftentimes you see date hierarchies, year, quarter, month, day, and that allows you to drag a single item into a visualization and have multiple fields appear. Now over in Excel, you have to select both items and right-click, create hierarchy. Here, watch this. I'm going to click on sales rep, drag it over region, and when I see the yellow dotted line, I drop. And that creates a hierarchy. Now I can simply drag one item to axis, and I want my measure over in values. Now I can click on the edge and expand. Now, we have to talk about these icons right here. Without touching those icons, if I were to click on Southeast, I see just this column, and then this visualization over here is filtered. That total right there is the total for Southeast. If I click it again, all the columns are colored, and now I'm back to the overall total. Now, if I choose the second button, which is turn on drill down, and you can see it's gray. When I click on Southeast, it'll actually show me the detail. That means the sales rep amounts as columns for Southeast. Click, and look at that. I get 1, 2, 3 sales rep and their columns. That total is the total for Southeast. Now, if I click drill up, I'm back to showing just the regions. Now, I turn this off. The next button, go to the next level in the hierarchy, shows me the sales rep. Drill up, and this will show me, in this case, the labels for region and sales rep. Now, the next task is I'd like to add some conditional formatting. Over in Paint Roller or Format, I don't see conditional formatting. It's actually under Data Colors. And I have to click on Advanced Controls. And I want to create a rule. Rules, and I want the rule to be for, from the F transaction, the measure, average daily gross profit. When it is greater than or equal to, that means the column height, 20,000, and less than or equal to 50K, I want it red. Click OK. And there I have some conditional formatting. Now, why did we choose this visualization? Well, column charts are awesome for comparing amounts across categories. Now, we don't have any detail, but we definitely could come over to the paintbrush, data labels, just like over in Excel. We click on, and there are the amounts. I'm going to click off. Now, we have average daily gross profit by sales rep and by product. Now we want to see that same measure, but see how it changes over time over our fiscal period. The perfect chart for that is a line chart. There's our line chart, fiscal period down to axis, average daily gross profit over to values. And there we have a basic line chart. We can resize, we can move. This line chart is the perfect visualization when we want to see how something is changing over time. Now we have one other part of our dashboard. We actually want to create a card So when I click on a particular element, it's filtering our other visualizations. But I also want to have some other numbers that will be filtered also. So we're going to show total revenue, total cost of goods sold, and a couple others in what is called a card. So I'm going to click in the white. And there's a card, but I want multi-row card. I'm going to click and drag this, resize it. And here's our fact table. I want to check total revenue. That'll make it first. Total cost of goods sold, total gross profit, and then percent gross profit. We can see our measures and the labels. Over to format. Background, I'm going to say on. And we'll have a color really light. I don't like that bar right there. Over to the card, show bar off. Category labels, I'm going to increase the font size to 15. Data labels, size 15. Now the last task, we want to select. I'm going to resize this. We want to make sure that when we click a particular element, it filters the other visualizations the way we want. And if we go up to Visual Tools Format, I have this matrix selected, so I click Edit Interactions. And now what I'm going to do is go to each one of the other visualizations and determine what happens when I click on an element. Here I have the off. So if I select Butte, it has no effect. I do want this to be filtered because I want to see for that product how the average daily profit is changing over our fiscal periods. I definitely want this one filtered also. Down here, I better resize this for a second. Click back on the matrix. And we have an option here. We can filter. And then when we select quad, it only shows the quad over here. But if we select the pie or highlight, that means we still get to see the overall total, but we'll have a visual cue for the totals for quad. And that's how we want to keep that one. So for each visual element, you select it, click Edit Interactions, and change the interactions. Now that's all we're going to do here. Click in the white, and we have completed our first dashboard. I can say, hey, I just want to see Chin Fam. There's each one of the products. There's the visualization over time for the average daily gross profit. And there's the total revenue, total cost of goods sold, gross profit, and percent gross profit. Click in the white, and we're back to no filters. Now this dashboard analyzes average daily gross profit based on various conditions or criteria. Our next dashboard is going to emphasize fiscal period. So I'm going to click the plus, double click, type fiscal report, and enter. Click in the white. Over in visualizations, I want clustered bar. We're going to check fiscal period. Then down in our measures, we want total gross profit. We're going to resize this. This is going to be vertical along the left. I would like to see the visual indication, but I also want some detail. So we come over to Format. Data labels, I want on. I also want some conditional formatting. Data colors, advanced. Color scale is exactly what I want. So it'll go from the minimum red all the way to the maximum green. Click OK. Look at that. It even added some white, some black, and it automatically lists it in millions. I'd like to see Excel do that automatically. Now watch this. I'm going to go back over to average daily gross profit. I'm going to select this and Control C because I want to use the same visualization over here. Control V. But on this one, I want to add data labels on. Now down here, we're going to use a matrix and add a bunch of different measures. So up to matrix, products. And I want to see percent gross profit first. Click. Then average daily gross profit. Total units, total revenue, cost of goods sold, total gross profit. Now over to format. And for the grid, I want the font size, let's say 10. You could add some other formatting if you want. For example, row headers, column headers. I want to add conditional formatting to just one of the measures, total revenue. So down to conditional formatting. Select the drop-down total revenue, and I want my data bars. Now, let's see. Let's resize this. And I want a slicer for region. Here's the slicer. Just region. It's huge. I'm going to resize it, bring it out in the middle. And we want a card at the top also. Resizing everything. Click in the white. Multi-row card. Total units, revenue, cost of goods sold, and total gross profit. Look at that. I don't know what was happening there. I'm going to click on multi-row card. And then I'll resize it, add some formatting. Now, I would like to add what's called a bookmark. I want to be able to select northeast and southeast. I use my control key there. And save that as a view. So I go up to View and Bookmarks pane. I can simply click Add, and whatever I did here will be saved. I want to rename it. I call that East View. Now I'm going to select using the Control key. There's a particular view. Add, Rename. So now we have two views. I can select, and instantly that view of the dashboard is shown. I'm going to use the eraser to erase everything. Now our next dashboard, I've already started it. It's called Average Transactional Revenue Last 12 Months. And I added a line chart. There's the line chart. And I dragged total revenue. Now total revenue is not the measure we want. We're actually going to create two new measures. So I'm going to go up to New Measure. Actually, Escape. We're going to make this easy on ourselves. We're going to go down to total revenue. I clicked it. I can see it up in the formula bar. I'm going to use the same formula, Control C, because this formula used SUMX to iterate at the transaction line level to calculate total revenue. But we'll use the same formula and change SUMX to AVERAGEX. New measure, Control V. I'm going to change the name, and I'm going to backspace and change it to AVERAGEX. And then hit Enter, and we're going to add some formatting. Now, if I click down in our line chart and come down and uncheck total revenue and check average transactional revenue, let's uncollapse this. There's our average transactional revenue. But we want to compare this line not to calculate the transactional average for each month, but I want to take the average at this time period, but look at the last 12 months. So this will be a rolling 12-month average. Now, all we have to do, since we have this measure, is change the filter context. Right there, it looks like September 2018. That measure at that point sees all of the days for 2018 September. That filter from the date table flows into the measure. But once it flows in, I need to change it so that it stretches all the way back from September 2018 all the way back to October 1st, 2017. No problem. The perfect function for changing the filter context is calculate. So we're going to create a new measure, rolling 12-month average transactional revenue, =, Shift-Enter, Tab. C to get my calculate tab, Shift Enter, and square bracket. We get our average transactional revenue and tab, comma, to get to our filter argument. And now what do we need? If we were in the position in our chart for September 2018, we have to take those valid dates, push them back a year, create a valid list of all the days from the year, and deliver that to calculate. So the perfect function for this is dates in period. Dates in period. Now the first argument, we have to put the date column from the date table, comma. Then we need the start date. Well, wait a second. If I'm in September 2018, I need the last day from that period. So I'm going to use, and they named this function smart, last date. And we put DD date. That's the actual date column. That column comes from the date table. So in the current filter context, The date table will be filtered down to, for example, September 2018. And last date will pick out the last day in September, comma. And this is amazing. We simply say number of intervals -1, comma. And then what is the interval? Now, over in Excel, we have the eDate function to jump back or forward a certain number of months. But look at this. We can jump back any increment. So I want year. Now, when I close parentheses on dates in period, it will see in any filter context 1 year back. And the beautiful thing is it provides a valid list of dates through the calculate function, which can change the filter context to the F transaction table, and then average transactional revenue is calculated. Close parentheses. Now, I didn't follow my convention. I never do. Shift-Enter. Shift-Enter. Shift-Tab, because I want to be lined up for calculate. Close parentheses and Enter. Now, I'm going to close this. Make sure the chart is selected and come down here, rolling average. Next, I'm going to click in the white, add a slicer, and I want year. So I'm going to check year. It gives me it as a slide bar, which maybe you like. I'm going to click this drop down and say, please give me a list. Resize it, move it. Come over to Format, Items, maybe 15, Slicer Header, 15. Now I can select 18, 17, 19, and 20, or erase. Later we'll get more years here. Finally, we want a matrix. I make sure that I'm selecting the white, click the matrix. Year into rows, month down to rows. Down to measures, I want average daily revenue, average transactional revenue, and our rolling. With that selected, up to Format, the grid, text size 15. Resize it, move it. And I definitely want to see both. Now we can show 17. All right, so that's our third dashboard. Now, our fourth dashboard is not really going to be a dashboard. I just want to show you the question feature. Over here in Home, there's Ask a Question. If I click this and type, so I simply typed out what I want, and there you go. Now, I don't particularly use this because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If I'm over in the white and ask the question, average daily revenue, matrix, which is what I want, product by sales rep, I'm thinking they're going to interpret this as a cross-tabulated, but they don't. They put both variables in the rows. Then I have to come over here and drag sales rep down to columns to get my cross-tabulated. So you might play around with that. Sometimes it gets it right. Sometimes it doesn't. Control S. And now we have completed 1, 2, 3, and 4 different dashboards. Now it's time to publish. Now we have the free Power BI desktop version, but we can still publish. So I'm going to click this Publish button in the Share group in the Home ribbon tab. Now it's going to ask you to sign in. I already have an account. If you don't, click this link for Try for Free. In the next window, it's going to ask you where you want to publish it. These are different groups of reports. We're going to publish it to My Workspace. Select. In the next window, it says, hey, it was a success. We've published it. We click this link right here to open it in PowerBI.com. And here it is, PowerBI.com. Here's our one dashboard. Down here, we can see our tabs. We can click between our tabs, select any particular condition or criteria. We're interacting with our report, which is made up of these different dashboards in our online version. Now, here's the amazing thing. There's a bunch of things we can do over here. We can actually edit here in our online version. I'm going to click Edit Report. And there are our fields and our visualizations. I'm going to go back to Reading View. Now, we are viewing this, but we can certainly share it. Now, up here under File, we can save as. We can print the current dashboard. We can share it by getting embed code for SharePoint Online. We can publish to the web, which means you get embed code, and then you have to put it into a website. So you would actually have to be the author of a website to use this feature. We can export it to PowerPoint. That just means if I click this, it will generate a PowerPoint presentation with each one of the dashboards on a different page. We can also, once we send the link to this online report to someone, if they want to download it as a .pbix file, they can do that here. Now this published to the web, we saw that at the beginning of the video. There it is right here. We can actually click through and interact with our report. This is available to the public. But again, you have to generate the embed code and be the author of a website to do this. Now over here, these are different workspaces. If you want to create different workspaces, you use that button. I have gel boomerangs in my workspace. My workspace is the one we are using. Down here under my workspace, these are all of the different reports I've published. The one we're looking at is this one right here. I also have other reports. This is Excel Magic Trick 1366. In this video, we learned how to create this dashboard with these pictures of the different products. I can select, please show me 2017 gel boomerangs, and everything updates. Now back to our report, all the way over here on the right. We want to look at the share button. Now, I've already signed up for my 60-day free trial for Power BI Pro. When you click this, if you don't have an account, in the Upgrade to Power BI Pro dialog box, click the Try Pro for free, and it will give you a 60-day free trial. Again, we have to have that Pro version to share it so people can view it on any device. I'm going to click Share, and here's our dialog box. Share. I can grant access to different people with different email addresses. I have an email address here. There's my email message. I can allow recipients to share or not. Send email notification, definitely. Now, before I click Share, there's the report link. Over here, I've already granted access to a number of people. We can also cancel at any time, remove access. I'm going to go back to Share and click Share. Here's my email notification. I click Go to Report. I'm going to click Go to Report. And there it is, dashboard number 1, dashboard number 2. And if I want to, as the recipient, download as a PBIX file or print it, I can do that. That is pretty amazing. Now back over here in Power BI Desktop, we need to refresh our data. I've copied the CSV data, 21 to 23, Control-C. In the Start folder, Control-V. Back over in Power BI Desktop, I can click Refresh. And now I have my refreshed report. I can go to my fiscal report, select Midwest, and I can see for all of the fiscal periods. Now with the new data, I'm going to publish this. And now over in PowerBI.com, I have my new data. That was an epic video. We saw how to create a Power BI desktop report with various dashboards and publish it to PowerBI.com. Over in our desktop version, we, of course, started by using Power Query to import, clean, and transform our data. We created a date table using DAX table functions and DAX calculated columns. We created our relationships between tables, lots of different measures. And then in Report View, we created our various dashboards. So in this MSPTDA video number 16, we saw that Power BI Desktop can do some amazing things. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excelisfun, including our next video number 17. We're going to talk all about the amazing Calculate DAX function. All right, we'll see you next video. If you like what you see in this video, click that subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified about new videos.